My name is Helen Parker, and the only thing in this world I ever claimed without apology was the house my husband and I built. One paycheck and one weekend at a time. On Saturday morning, I was watering the rose bush out front, the one my husband planted the week Daniel was born, when I heard the living room curtains scrape on their rod. Samantha stood there, arms crossed, chin lifted like she'd measured the room and found me out of place. "We're changing this place," she said. Not unkindly, not kindly either. "It's our home now." Before I could answer, Daniel came down the hall, keys in his hand, shoulders tight the way they get when he wants to leave before a conversation starts. He looked past the rose bush, past me, and said, "Mom, don't argue with my wife in her house." Her house. The words cracked like ice in a glass. I didn't drop the watering can. I set it down on the porch step, careful the spout didn't clip the wood. If dignity has a sound, it's that tiny click of metal touching paint while you decide whether to speak or to breathe. I breathed. The air smelled like wet soil in last summer's mulch. Inside. Samantha was already tugging at the curtains again, testing how much daylight she'd let in and how much of me she'd shut out. Daniel kissed her temple in the doorway and didn't look at me when he said he'd be back before lunch. He said it to the hallway, to the keys, to anyone but the woman who raised him in that house. "Your father hung those curtains," I said, to say something that wasn't a fight. Samantha's smile was thin. "They're dated, Helen. We'll keep what still works." She didn't mean the fabric. I followed her into the kitchen, because it's the room that knows my hands best, and because a person shouldn't be left alone with your memories if she thinks they're clutter. The morning light ran across the counter like a ribbon, and I could see where she'd moved the salt from the stove to the far corner. A small thing that felt like a sign written in a language I almost understood. "Please don't move the salt," I said. I reached for it without thinking. "We'll all learn new places," she answered, and opened a cabinet that used to hold casserole dishes and now held nothing at all. I stood very still, listening to the house breathe around us. The refrigerator hummed, the old clock ticked, steady as a heartbeat. I thought of my rose bush outside, roots deep, petals thin as tissue, alive because I had kept it that way. "Her house," Daniel had said. I pressed my palm to the edge of the counter until the sting steadied me. People think dignity is loud. I have found it's often quiet, like the decision you make not to cry where someone can see. By lunchtime, they were gone on their errands. I rinsed the watering can, put the salt back by the stove, and locked the back door with a turn that felt like a prayer. I didn't argue. Not yet. But I took note of how cheaply respect is spent when someone thinks they'll never need change. And that was the day I began to count what was mine. Not in things, but in the right to decide where they stayed. They moved in for a couple of weeks, the way people drop a suitcase and call it temporary. Daniel said their condo's plumbing was a mess. He joked about contractors, but I saw him glance at Samantha to make sure he told it right. I said yes because mothers remember the price of loneliness better than rent. At first, the changes were small. A new pillow here, a vase that matched nothing. Then the hallway table disappeared, the rug rolled up, the family photos boxed and labeled storage, frames in Samantha's tidy script. Her handwriting made every decision look official. I tried to stay gracious. A home breathes with whoever lives in it, I told myself. At dinner, I learned the names of pipes and fittings I'd never thought about. Samantha worked from my dining table, her phone chiming mid-conversation. She said she designed interiors for clients who wanted calm spaces. I wondered what she thought this one was. She wanted the kitchen lighter, which meant my curtains and pot rack were outdated. I said the curtains kept the afternoon sun from burning the room. She said an oscillating fan would do the same and wouldn't shout the 80s. I said my husband hung that rack. She said people are allowed to grow. They are. but growth shouldn't mean uprooting the ground beneath someone else. I let the rack go. The ceiling hook stayed like empty eyes watching me cook. One Tuesday morning, I found Samantha in the yard with a trowel, sneakers bright white against the soil. The rose bush my husband planted when Daniel was born stood clipped into a shape that belonged in a catalog, not a life. "Please don't cut it like that," I said. "It blooms on old wood. If you take too much, it forgets what it was." "It'll be fine," she answered, cheerful and sure. I watched a video. I knelt beside the bush, touched the fresh cut, and felt the sting run through me. Daniel came out with 2 coffees, handed one to her and the other to me like a truce. "Morning," he said. "Looks nice out here." "It looked nice yesterday," I said. "It looked like your father's hands." He sighed. "Mom, don't start. Sam's just trying to make it feel like home." "It is home," I said. "Her home," he corrected quietly. "She needs to feel welcome." There were 100 answers I could have given. I chose silence. Instead, I asked if they wanted pancakes. When he said sure, I went inside and poured the batter like always. Habit is its own prayer. I reached for the salt and found empty space. Samantha had moved it near the blender. It was nothing. Less than nothing, but my hand froze in mid-air, as if the air itself had changed shape. "Please keep the salt by the stove," I said. "We'll all get used to the new layout," she called back, and left the room. Daniel scrolled his phone at the table. A man waiting for someone else's bus. The pancake bubbled. I flipped it, served him one. Ate another, alone, after they'd gone. The kitchen hummed the way it does when the only conversation left is with the clock. That afternoon, I went to the hardware store. The clerk, a woman my age named Carol, asked what I needed. "Something that turns smooth but holds firm," I said. She smiled like she understood more than locks. At home, I brewed tea and waited until the sun shifted low through the windows. Changing locks is easy if you don't think about what it means. I replaced each screw carefully, tested the turn until it clicked right. The sound landed in my chest like punctuation. I left the old keys on the kitchen table. Then I stepped onto the porch and watched the yard breathe. Fresh cuts, tidy lines, a rose bush that didn't yet know it had been changed. I closed the door gently, almost tenderly, as if the house might bruise. Late afternoon, their car rolled in. I heard laughter, then the jangle of bags, then the rattle of the knob. The rattle turned to knocking. "What happened to the lock?" Daniel asked through the door. "This house," I said, "needed to remember who it belongs to." Samantha's eyes widened. Daniel searched my face for the mother who always yielded. I kept my voice calm. "You'll get a key when I see some respect." "We live here," Samantha said, disbelief sharp around the edges. "You stay here," I answered. "Living requires respect." Daniel's jaw set. "We'll call the police." "You can," I said. "Bring them to my porch. I have the deed and a kettle. They can pick which one to look at first." He didn't call. He took her hand, walked her back to the car. They sat there arguing quietly, 2 people realizing the story had turned without their permission. I watched from the window, not triumphant, not guilty, just steady. I made dinner for one. At my corner of the table, facing the yard where the rose stood too neat, stripped of its bend, I ate slowly. When the dishes were done, I wrote a note on an envelope and taped it to the door. This home needs respect before it opens its doors again. Upstairs, the wall was bare where family photos once hung. I touched the blank paint like a page waiting for a new sentence and went to bed in a house that, for the first time in weeks, whispered my name again. The morning after I changed the locks, the silence in the house felt deeper than ordinary quiet. It was a kind of silence that pressed against the walls, waiting to see if I would regret what I'd done. I didn't. I poured myself coffee, sat by the window, and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. It sounded like the house was breathing again. By mid-morning, Daniel called. I let it ring, then Samantha, then Daniel again. Their numbers blinked and disappeared. When the landline rang, something from another decade, I picked up, just to end the noise. "Mom," Daniel said, voice tight. "What are you doing?" "I'm drinking my coffee." "You can't lock us out." "I can," I said quietly, and I did. "That's insane." "No," I said. "It's ownership." I hung up before he could answer. I spent the rest of the day cleaning. Every corner I dusted felt like reclaiming an inch of my own skin. When I opened the closet and found Samantha's boxes stacked where my photo albums used to be, I carried them to the garage. They weren't heavy, just full of things that didn't belong to my history. That night, headlights swept the curtains. I didn't move. Daniel knocked hard, calling my name. "Mom, open the door." "I will when you're ready to listen," I said through the wood. "I am listening." "Then stop shouting." He banged once more, then the sound faded down the steps. I sat on the couch until the silence folded over the house again. The next day a police officer came, a young man with polite eyes and too much sympathy. "Mrs. Parker," he said, "your son asked us to check on you." "I'm fine," I said, holding out the property deed I'd left ready on the counter. "You can tell him his mother is safe and legal." The officer nodded, glanced around the living room as if it might confess something. "It's a nice home," he said. "It was," I said. "It will be again." When he left, the air felt lighter. No one had stood up for me in a long time, so I'd learned to do it myself. By the third night, guilt came creeping like a draft under the door. I wondered if they'd eaten, if they were arguing, but guilt and dignity rarely share the same room. I went to bed early, hand-brushing the wall where the family photos once hung, empty now but somehow peaceful. The following morning, my neighbor Bill stopped by with mail I'd forgotten to collect. "Heard some ruckus the other day," he said. "Everything okay?" "Helen?" "Everything's being sorted," I answered. He nodded like a man who'd watched too many families fall apart over smaller things. "Sometimes taking the house back is the only way to keep the home," he said. Then he tipped his hat and left. 2 days later, I saw Daniel's car parked across the street. He sat inside, engine off, head resting on the steering wheel. I didn't go out. Sometimes a mother has to let her child feel the weight of silence before he hears anything else. That evening, he called again. "We're staying at the motel," he said flatly. "Are you happy now?" "I don't think happy is the word," I said. "Maybe relieved." "This isn't like you. You don't know me as well as you think," I said. There was a pause. "We just need a few days," he said finally. "You can take all the time you need," I replied. "Respect doesn't have a deadline." He hung up. I stood in the kitchen afterward, kettle whistling, tea bag steeping dark in the cup, and thought of how mothers and sons sometimes have to lose each other to learn how to speak again. A week passed. The motel clerk, Rita, who sang in my church choir, called one afternoon. "Helen," she said softly, "they're here. They look worn out." "I'm sure they'll manage," I said. "They're young. They can build from discomfort." That night, thunder rolled in. I sat on the porch and watched rain fill the gutters. The rose bush quivered, heavy with water. I whispered to it, "Hold on." The next day, there was a knock. When I opened the door, Samantha stood there alone. Rain streaked her hair, eyes swollen, hands shaking around a folded piece of paper. "May I come in?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. She stepped inside, leaving small wet footprints on the floor. We sat at the kitchen table, the one she'd once called too old-fashioned. She slid the paper toward me. "It's from Daniel." I unfolded it. His handwriting slanted, pressed too hard, like when he was a boy. "Mom, I'm sorry. I forgot what home meant. I forgot how you built this place for us to belong. I can't fix what I said, but I'll listen if you'll still talk to me." I didn't cry. I'd done enough of that in my life. "And you?" I asked her. "I was wrong," she said quickly, eyes dropping. I wanted everything perfect, but perfect started meaning control. I thought if I changed the house, it would stop feeling like yours and start feeling like mine. But it never did. Her honesty softened something in me. I poured tea and pushed a cup toward her. "You cut the rose bush," I said. "I know. I watched it wilt. I tried to fix it, but..." She looked up, helpless. I didn't understand how roots work. "Most people don't," I said. "They think cutting something down makes room for growth. Sometimes it just kills what held them." She nodded. "Can I bring Daniel back? He wants to apologize in person." "Bring him," I said, "but he'll listen first." They came an hour later. Daniel looked older than he had a week ago, unshaven, tired. "Mom," he started. "Sit," I said. He sat. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The clock ticked loud between us. Finally, he said, "I was a coward. I let her take the blame for things I should have stopped. I thought keeping peace was being a good husband." "Peace isn't silence," I said. "It's respect." "I know that now." Samantha wiped her eyes. "We just want to make it right." "Helen." I leaned back, folded my hands. "You can start by learning the rules of my house." They both looked at me, waiting. "1," I said. "You respect this home. Every corner, every memory. 2, no yelling. 3, no changes without asking. 4, we share 1 meal a week, no phones, no excuses. And 5, when you're wrong, you apologize and mean it." Daniel managed a small smile. 5 rules. Simple enough. Simple is how families survive, I said. They both nodded. I slid a notepad toward them. "Sign it." They did, their names looping beneath mine. For the first time in weeks, the air between us felt breathable again. Afterward, I led them outside. The rain had stopped, but the yard was slick and soft. The rose bush leaned like an old woman. I knelt beside it and touched the trimmed branch. "We'll replant," I said. "You can help." Samantha knelt beside me. "Will it grow again?" "If we care for it," I said. "If we don't forget where the roots are." Daniel crouched down and started clearing the wet soil. We worked together in silence, 3 people who had learned more from mistakes than from love songs. When we finished, Samantha brushed her hands on her jeans. "It looks fragile." "Most things worth saving do," I said. Daniel looked at me, his face open, stripped of pride. "I'm sorry, Mom." "I know," I said. "That's why we're still here." They left just before sunset, promising to come for Sunday dinner. I watched their car disappear down the street and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but the first step toward it. The house was quiet again, but the silence felt alive this time. I made myself tea, opened the window, and listened to the rain beginning again. On the counter sat the signed notepad, 5 small promises under 3 names. I tucked it into the drawer where I keep the spare keys. Outside, the rose bush glistened, bent but rooted, ready to bloom when the season turned. I thought of my husband, of all the repairs he used to make without fuss, and said aloud into the soft dark, "We fixed something today, didn't we?" And for the first time in weeks, the house seemed to agree. Sunday came bright and steady, the kind of morning that forgives the week before. I woke early, baked cornbread, and set 3 plates on the table without thinking too hard about what that meant. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen before I heard their car in the driveway. Daniel knocked once, then opened the door slowly. "Morning, Mom," he said, voice careful. "Morning," I answered, turning the bacon. "You remember where the plates are?" He smiled, a little shy. "I think so." Samantha followed, holding a small bouquet of grocery store roses. "For the table," she said. "They're not the same kind as yours." But I thought, "They'll do fine," I said, taking them from her hands. The gesture was awkward but honest, which is the best kind of apology. We sat down. For a minute, nobody spoke, and then Daniel reached for the cornbread like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Smells like home," he said quietly. "It is home," I said. "It always was. We just forgot how to treat it." We ate in that fragile peace that comes after a storm, where every small sound matters. The scrape of forks, the clink of cups, the sighs between words. After the meal, we carried our dishes to the sink, shoulder to shoulder. Samantha washed, Daniel dried. I put things back where they belonged. No one said it out loud, but all 3 of us were grateful for the ordinary. When they finished, Daniel turned to me. "We'll move back into our place next week, but if it's all right, we'd like to keep the Sunday dinners." "That's what the 4th rule is for," I said. "You wrote it." He nodded. I guess I meant it more than I realized. Samantha looked around the kitchen, softer now. "You haven't changed a thing since we left." "I didn't need to," I said. The house already knew what it was. We stepped outside to check the rose bush. New shoots had begun to appear along the base, small and red as hope. Samantha knelt, touched one carefully. "It's coming back," she whispered. "Everything does," I said, "if you give it time." The 3 of us stood there for a long moment. No grand speeches, no tears, just the quiet understanding that something broken had found its way back into shape. Before they left, Daniel handed me a small key ring. "For the spare keys," he said. "We had a copy made in case you ever lose yours." I held the keys in my palm, their weight familiar. "I won't lose them," I said, then smiled. "But I like knowing someone else finally knows where they belong." They drove away down the long street, and I watched until the car turned out of sight. The house didn't feel empty this time. It felt steady, like a heart that had learned how to beat without rushing. That evening, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders. The sky was pink and gold, the air smelling faintly of wet earth. Across the yard, the rose bush caught the last light of the day, its leaves trembling in the breeze. I thought about my husband, about the years of work that built these walls, about the boy who'd grown up inside them and the woman who'd tried to claim them. I thought about all the times I'd stayed silent when I should have spoken, and all the times speaking had cost me peace. Every lesson had led here, to this porch, this quiet, this small bloom of forgiveness. Sometimes people believe locking a door means shutting someone out, but I've learned it can mean something else entirely. It can mean teaching others how to knock, with respect, with patience, with love that knows its boundaries. I sipped my tea, felt the warmth spread through my hands, and smiled toward the yard. The house was mine. The peace was, too. And finally, so was the silence. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.